Welcome to the tech episode of Dancing with Systems. What a timely discussion to have at this moment in time. We know that tech is both the enabler of every other systems transition, more of that soon, but it's also a sector in its own right with a rapidly growing footprint. And right now, those two, a force for good, a force with its own impacts, are now really in tension. And the AI boom is the sort of epicenter of that defining dynamic, with data centers becoming one of the world's fastest growing consumers of water and of energy, and often concentrating in communities where people don't want them. So the narrative is turning in a way that I don't think we've seen before. And really interesting, the narrative is turning in a way that's hopping over politics. People are getting fearful of AI. And so what a great opportunity to talk about tech and systems transitions.
Yeah, well, this is a fantastic episode and so central to everything that we're living with. Let me put a few numbers to some of those opening remarks that you made. So the 5 big tech companies are now spending more than the oil and gas industry on capital investment. And so that's 400 billion in 2025. That's expected to jump 75% this year in 2026. So
Can I just say, wow?
Yeah, it's being supercharged, right? And of course, the big link there is to data centers, and we've seen some stepping back from commitments by those big tech companies. We've seen some concerns around emissions. We do need to keep it in perspective, right? Data centers account for around 1.5% of global consumption of electricity, so much less than some other sectors. But it has been growing around 12% since 2017. So, it is ramping up. That's 4 times faster than electricity consumption in other areas. So, it is something that we have to be concerned about. But there is an open question, could AI actually deliver some of the emission reductions as a result of all the benefits it brings? And at the moment, there's an estimate by the International Energy Agency of reductions of perhaps 5% by 2035. So, I guess that's something we might explore in this episode as well.
So lots of big numbers there, and also a story of exponential growth as well in terms of that capital investment number. So we're talking about tech. What is it, Wayne, that you're interested to hear about?
Yeah, well, I think it makes sense that we're going to focus in really on the tech of the day, which is AI and data and so on. And what we know is that this is now the great accelerator. The question really is it going to accelerate the transition that we're looking for in all these other sectors, or is it going to accelerate the decline, the problem? So that's a big question, something I'd like to hear more about. And we do hear a lot, especially on social media, about the impact of data centers. And I'm just wondering whether we're getting caught in a little bit of hype here, and whether it really is as bad as social media seems to suggest that it is. So I'd love some perspective from our guests on that. So what about you? What are you hoping to hear?
I'm really curious about how does accountability for AI work? Is it down to governments to develop policies? Because at the moment, the policy framework is really lagging the exponential growth of particularly AI. Is it the hyperscalers? And intriguingly, is it us? Because we're beginning to understand that AI has positive impacts, but also there is a lot of fear about job losses, etc. So where does accountability lie in order to ensure that AI is on balance a force for good? That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, and I guess that's going to link also to the social elements, right, of AI. So, well, let's jump in. And who have we got first?
We've got Joel Makower.
Okay. Do you want to give us an introduction? Who is Joel?
I can. Joel is a wonderful person. He's also the chair and co-founder of Trellis Group, who were formerly GreenBiz Group. I think people are still getting used to that name change. GreenBiz, Trellis, as they are now, a leading media and events platform at the intersection of business, sustainability and clean technology. He's also the strategy director of the Music Sustainability Alliance. I need to go on.
Interesting.
He's a former nationally syndicated columnist. He is a journalist by training, with over 35 years covering sustainable business. He was one of the first journalists I remember talking about sustainability in business. And he's the author of more of a dozen books and lead author of the annual State of the Green Business Report. The Associated Press has called him the guru of green business practices, and he is inducted into the International Society of Sustainable Professionals Hall of Fame.
The perfect person to set the scene on tech for us.
Great.
Let's hear from him now. Welcome, Joel, to this episode of Dancing with Systems. It's such a pleasure to have you as one of our veterans who's also been focused on tech for a long time and taken a special interest throughout your journalistic career especially. And so we'd like to kick off by asking you, there are two ways to look at tech. One is that tech is an enabler for transitions in other sectors. And so we'd like to start with that. But then, of course, there is the tech sector itself, which has its own impacts. But maybe you could start by giving us your view of how tech can be and maybe is being used to help the other sectors transition to net zero, nature positive, and so on.
Well, you're right in that tech is both an enabler of other transitions and also a sector with its own footprint. And right now, those two faces are in tension. The same data center build out that's powering AI, for example, is becoming one of the largest sources of demands on energy, water, land, and other things. So we're at this really interesting moment. And I know that there's a debate is I think putting it lightly around, what is the purpose, the value of AI to society, and for whom? And so right now we're having that discussion in a significant way, and understanding that it's not, there's both sides. So simply on the enabling side, when you look at pretty much all of the challenges that we as humanity are facing, energy, water, materials, toxicity, the carbon cycle, hydraulic cycle, pretty much everything, the energy, electricity grid, these are among the most incredibly complex systems that we know of and we barely understand. In addition, these things are spewing data 24/7, whether it's about plants or about energy plants or actually green plants, and so making sense of that, understanding it, and being able to optimize and predict and monitor those things is really one of technology's great advances here, and has an incredible promise. But I think the irony here is that we can now measure emissions and planetary impact far better than we can reduce them.
Yeah. And I guess that's the question. If you think about those different sectors and transitions that we're trying to enable, where do you see that technology is already having that impact? We're already seeing it scaling, because it's not only about the data, it's also about new technologies, literally. And where do you see where it's kind of lagging behind and there's still a gap?
Well, first of all, we should acknowledge that technology is a very, very broad term.
Yeah.
These days we often use it to refer to digital technologies, from phones and computers to AI systems and on and on. But technology goes much broader than that. So I'm assuming we're going to be sticking to the more recent way we talk about technology, which is and I think this is where we're seeing the positive impact so far is in digital measurement and transparency, infrastructure, sensors, satellites, supply chain traceability, grid optimization. These are things that don't necessarily decarbonize directly, but they make accountability possible. And that's a significant change from the past where we didn't really understand what was going on. And that really is a precondition for pretty much all of the other changes we want to make and need to make. So again, as I said before, we know how to measure things and monitor things. We just don't know how to change them for the better.
And I guess that then leads us to the transition of the tech sector itself. So clearly we know that tech is already enabling us to map deforestation. It's giving us access to early warning systems for farmers. It's giving us access to data on air pollution incidents. So tech as an enabler of these other systems transitions, as we've been discussing, is clear. But then if we look at the impact of the tech sector itself, where do you think we are, Joel? And what are the sort of the big challenges that we need to overcome? Does that take us straight back to a data center?
Well, inevitably it does, because so much of what we're talking about is either happening in the cloud, which originates in a data center, or in AI, which of course is a data center as well. And largely as a result of data centers and all the devices that flow into and out of them, is that the sector's own transition is going backwards on the metrics that matter most, because AI, the compute demand, is outpacing the efficiency and clean energy gains. And so the biggest tech companies, the Googles and the Metas and ChatGPT and all the others, or OpenAI, their emissions are actually going up, and at a time when they had committed to making significant reductions. And so that's a challenge. And the good news is we have a lot of those solutions. We know how to drive data centers, or create data centers that are energy and water and possibly positive. We're seeing some advances there. And the question is, how do these things not just exist on the planet, but also exist within communities? And that's one of the challenges, because people are afraid of technology in a way that I haven't seen in a long, long time. People weren't afraid of PCs. They weren't afraid of smartphones. They weren't afraid of the internet, although all of those things had brought challenges, but not the kinds of fears that we're seeing now with data centers and AI. And so, the societal impacts and the backlash that we're now seeing around the world. There's a stat here in the United States, a Gallup poll that said that more people would prefer to live near a nuclear power plant than a data center. I mean, that's astounding. Even if it's not exactly true, even if the people are exaggerating, just the thought of that, or the fact that it might even be, on a par with a nuclear power plant, is just an amazing development. And so we need to be addressing, and a lot of those things are both environmental fears of these data centers using too much energy and water, but also the fears that the technology itself brings in terms of job loss, changes that people aren't necessarily looking forward to, child pornography, so many challenges, cybercrime, and so on. So, if you go beyond the planetary boundaries and look at the societal boundaries, if you will, these have some significant challenges.
And so, Joel, just before I hand back to Wayne, it seems to me in a way that the hyperscalers, the big tech players, they've sort of lost control of the narrative a little bit here, haven't they? And, as a journalist, as an award-winning journalist with lots of experience in this field, what's your sense of how might they contribute to a different narrative? Because it seems to me unless we can shift the narrative, this kind of fear is just going to keep growing.
Well, that's a really tall order, Sally. I think the technology in and of itself isn't going to shift the narrative. What's going to shift the narrative are the data center providers, the AI companies, the hyperscalers coming in and showing the benefits and working closely with communities to help them understand, first of all, address their concerns and then understand how these can be helpful in optimizing systems and creating new opportunities in reducing the kinds of negative impacts on the planet that we know all too well. But those right now that these companies have been far more enamored with their own technology than trying to make that make sense to the people who are impacted most, and those right now are in local communities. So at some point there will be, as I said before, energy and water positive data centers that will actually be welcome in the communities because they'll be providing some environmental and social goods. As I said, those technologies exist, but they're a ways off. And certainly at the scale, scope, and speed of the data center build out, particularly in China and the United States, but around the world, we're not going to be seeing those innovations anytime soon, simply because most data centers are only maybe incrementally improved from the previous one, and very few data center builders have been fired for making the next data center look pretty much like the last one. And so getting some of the technologies that have been around for years, waterless cooling technologies, for example, are still not as widespread as they could be. And we're just now starting to see the energy technologies develop that can, there's this a trend in at least in the States, maybe globally, called bring your own power, where in order for a data center to build in a community, they have to provide their own electricity needs, on-site generation, in whatever form that is. So until those become widespread and people start to see, oh, these are actually great benefits to our communities, then I think they'll start to look at what the technology actually does. But until then, it's going to be I think a really bumpy ride for the tech sector.
Yeah, as you're talking, Joel, it reminds me of Kenneth Boulding's characterization of the cowboy economy versus the spaceship economy, and it does feel, at the moment, especially with big tech and AI, it's a wild west, and where there's seemingly no frontiers. At least that's how they're behaving. But also, as you're talking, two other thoughts came to mind. One is, are we suffering from technology lock-in? It feels like quite a new technology, but the kinds of setups that we have for data centers, as you say, we're kind of replicating them, but there are better ways to do them. It's just that now that we've already invested in this kind of setup, it seems hard to change. And my sort of follow-up and final question really is, so where does that leave us? What are the levers for changing this behavior, for getting to the kinds of efficiencies that we believe are probably out there? It's very early days, right? So this should go down an efficiency curve as well. And an innovation curve. So where do you see the main levers?
Well, in simply put, we need to set a high bar and a high floor. So we need to, in communities, need to really start pressing data center builders in ways that they haven't yet. There, as much protest as there has been, as much of a big of a backlash as there has been, it really hasn't had gotten traction as a national movement. I think we're going to see that start to shift here in the United States. For example, it's going to become a big issue in the 2026 midterm elections. We're seeing that already. And as it becomes a sort of a cause célèbre for, and it crosses over left and right politics, left, right, and center. It's amazingly bi or tripartisan here. So we need, in order to do that, we need some kinds of regulations or legislation. The data center companies want that. The builders want that. I think the entire ecosystem says we need to, some kinds of guidelines, some kinds of guardrails of what we can build. And communities need to really press on that. And so it's really a combination of laws and social pressure that's going to change things. As I said, the technology's been around, but there's haven't been any incentives for using it. And the technology, it continues to improve, like all technologies do. The energy technologies, the waterless cooling technologies, all of those things are really year over year beginning to change. So it's inevitably, and as it is with so many of these challenges, it's a number of forces working together over time. But there is a movement that is really shaping up, and I think it's going to be a really politically powerful movement that's going to transcend the political parties as we've known them, and it'll be really, really interesting to watch how frustrated and angry people are and scared about these technologies and what it will take to change them. I wish I had an answer of what that magic wand would be, but I don't, and I don't think anyone else does yet at this point.
Thanks, Joel. I'm glad also that you ended on social movements, because this is such a critical lever in systems change, and maybe one that we don't always pay enough attention to. So thank you once again for spending a bit of time with us today and sharing some of your insights. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you, Joel.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you, and the best to you too.
Well, that was really interesting, and I'm looking forward to dissecting some of what we've just heard there. But who's next?
Well, next we have giving us a little bit of a deep dive and a company focus, more in the weeds, is Anna Lerner Nesbitt. She's CEO of the Climate Collective, where she leads an ecosystem of technology innovators and sustainability leaders creating system-level solutions. She's got almost 20 years of working at the intersection of impact and tech. She's held senior leadership positions at Meta, formerly Facebook, the World Bank Group, and the Global Environment Facility, always focused on the frontier of tech adoption and market-based solutions, and also the social impact initiatives globally. So, what a perfect guest.
Great, let's hear from her. Welcome, Anna. Thank you for joining us in the Dancing for Systems podcast. Lovely to have you here. We have got a few questions for you, really reflecting your experience at the intersection of tech and AI and sustainability. And I'd like to start with a question that's on everyone's lips right now, which is AI good for sustainability? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and unpack this with you. This is a question I'm getting all the time from organizations that we train at Climate Collective, from friends, from peers who've also worked in sustainability I've been in this space for 20 years. People are concerned and worried, and there's a lot of uncertainty. So very happy to be here and unpack it with you. I would say, to ground ourselves first, this is gray. I'm sorry. It's neither or on its own, right? AI will be good. AI could be really positive for whatever we point it towards. If we ask AI to supercharge sustainability teams, decarbonization strategies, the clean energy transition, it will supercharge that. Make it faster, better, allow it to scale, simplify financing, all the things that we really desperately need. But if we just let AI sort of exist on its own, if we embed AI in the current economic system, it will just reinforce what's already here. And as we all know, that's not exactly sustainable. So two things I'd like to just add when this comes up. AI will only move the needle on sustainability in a meaningful way if a large amount of people use it for emission reductions or protection biodiversity. If we're just doing like cat pictures or birthday invitations on ChatGPT, it's not going to solve staying within planetary boundaries, right? And second, and this is probably the more important point, not all AI is the same. Not all AI will have the same positive and negative impact. The most valuable contributions to sustainability won't come from consultants or conservation nonprofits using chatbots. That will help them and their organizational efficiency, but the big, like really big improvements that we are desperately needing will come from applied AI, embedded in industrial systems, optimizing logistics or improving smart grids, finding new protein sources, accelerating carbon removal investments. That's really where the big bang for the buck will come.
That's so interesting and incredibly helpful, because effectively what you're saying is we need to really understand the role of AI in accelerating systems transitions that are underway, and not view it as something separate or a threat or an opportunity in its own right. But the exam question, if you will, is, how might AI accelerate the energy transition, accelerate the food systems transition, health systems transition? On that basis, then, how do we get that message out more concretely and cut through all the sort of noise about AI is going to destroy jobs or AI is going to clean my data for me? How do we sort of elevate that sort of strategic application of AI?
That's a great question. I think currently the big narrative out there is kind of anchored around fear. Unless you adopt AI really fast, you'll be missing out. You're going to lose your job. Do you have enough money on your savings account? But none of that is an inviting narrative, a narrative that opens up for exploration or joy or curiosity. Nor is it particularly like regenerative. So I think first we need to, my theory of change as an organization is kind of a mini universe of that question you have. I think one is educating people, helping people understand what AI is, what it isn't, and when it could augment or complement humans and human expertise, and when it really shouldn't, because the risks are too high. I call that AI literacy. So like raising AI literacy amongst the general public, amongst civil society, amongst governments. I mean, how could governments regulate this technology if they don't quite understand it? I mean, that's right. So I think lifting understanding and talking about it is one really critical component. The other piece is to invite for transparency. I mean, we do trainings for conservation nonprofits, net zero alliances, corporate sustainability teams, and I can't even tell them with real numbers exactly what their AI footprint is. So that creates this kind of uncertainty where people are like a bit worried, but pushed to hurry up and quickly adopt this so they're not missing out. And as humans, we always find a way to game the system where we always start optimizing for like, who's using the most tokens, who's burning the biggest AI, who has the biggest AI bills, and like none of those indicators are KPIs that we should really measure ourselves as a society. So yeah, I think agency, like building agency amongst people, civil society is really the key here.
And Anna, when you talk about the narrative and the fears and the uncertainties, certainly in our space where we're concerned about sustainability, the first thing that comes up is AI's energy footprint, and then AI's water footprint, and then, of course, all of the ethical issues around how AI might be used. And I wonder how you see that also in contrast with the potential upside, even on energy or on water or on many other solutions. Is there a kind of net positive narrative as well that we're failing to get across?
Yes. There's very little research with actual data on this yet. It's a new topic, but there's just not enough information out there, so we can't quite measure the exact energy footprint or the exact water usage of certain facilities. I think that's silly, because think about when you go to a grocery store, you can often find out which fishing boat a specific fish was caught on. You can even find out what were their fishing practices. Like, we've figured out a way to trace a lot of information through value chains. Why can't I know where my AI was processed? If I'm using Claude, why can't I know what data center those prompts were routed via? I mean, technically it's totally possible. So it's not just a matter of like, I can't access that information.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes a big difference, I think, if your AI was processed in a data center operating on a dirty grid. Like, I'm from northern Sweden, I'd feel really good if my prompts were routed through that data center in northern Sweden that has almost entirely renewable energy. But I would feel really uncomfortable if it's going through a data center that's now powered by natural gas, because then kind of my impact as a sustainability organization just feels it feels misaligned.
Yeah. And maybe also to remind people that we're at such an early stage with AI. And if we looked at the efficiency of the internal combustion engine when it just came out, it would be terrible. Same with solar panels. So, I expect a technology innovation curve that will happen there as well. But what do you say to companies now who are grappling to internalize, to adopt, to apply AI? What you hear so much about is maybe speed over wisdom, I would say, just trying to do it faster and as quickly as possible. And then I've also heard talk among businesses about the difference between using AI as a tool and becoming AI native, which I think speaks more to what you were saying is, we're actually using it to change our products and our services and our processes, not just to become more efficient.
Yeah. All of these points are quite poignant right now, and I think you're right. We're so early that even someone like me, who I spend all my waking hours thinking and reading and doing sustainability and AI, and still there's so much that happens every day that I'm struggling to keep up with. I think for corporations, when we work with sustainability teams, corporate sustainability teams, they're struggling from kind of a large responsibility and burden of reporting requirements often, and kind of communicating why a green option makes sense for the corporate narrative. And I think AI can be really helpful here. AI really can act as that kind of bridge that ties together different investments and different strategies across a company. AI can also help them produce certain things, let's say like sustainability reporting. Using AI to enhance that can make a lot of the kind of burdensome, heavy data processing slim down, and instead allow them to focus on kind of the more, where their human judgment is more important, and kind of where connections and that humanity is more valued. So I think there are really great examples already emerging of how corporates can embed AI in their own sustainability strategies and programs. I think a responsible AI approach would be to also support regulation. I think corporates have a really important role these days in like underlining the need for regulation. We missed the boat on regulating social media, and see where that got us. I think self-regulation has also not worked well for climate or nature contributions. So I think we have an opportunity here to do this better. And last one, I would tell corporates too, look at your suite of partners. Who do you partner with? Do they know how to use AI well? Could you support them as you're learning how to do this responsibly, sustainably? Could you support your partners in doing the same? For example, we partner with Klarna, which is a large fintech company in Sweden. they're a long-standing backer of climate and nature entrepreneurs. The first thing they did was to ask their portfolio companies if they have the resources to use AI well. When they realized they didn't, they then came to us and asked if we could help build AI literacy in their companies.
Yeah.
And just from some trainings and interventions, we're already seeing this massive boost in these organizations' output, saving costs, reaching new fundraising targets, and having an impact.
Yeah.
And that wasn't possible before. So I think corporations have a really new level of kind of responsibility looking inwards, but also responsibility looking outwards for their partners and
Yeah.
value chain.
Anna, just our last question to you, if we can. That was a really lovely and different insight into AI, particularly how AI can be framed as potentially accelerating these systems transitions. Would love, I guess, your advice for organizations that are committed to their role in systems transitions. What's your kind of top 1-2 pieces of advice for change makers in businesses that want to wrap their arms around AI and use it for systems transformation? And what's your advice for us as individuals?
I think we have a lot to learn from how corporations approached the SDGs. One of my jobs when I worked at Meta was to build out Meta's response to the Sustainable Development Goals, with the goal of sort of accelerating progress on the SDGs. We then looked inwards first. We thought like, okay, we call them superpowers because it's a tech company. So what are Meta's superpowers? What could Meta bring to the table that's unique for them? And in our case, when we looked at then trying to match that with the different SDGs that were priorities, we found, well, we have unique data sets, we have unique AI capabilities, engineers, and compute. So then we kind of anchored our interventions and our programs and our partnership outreach around those things that we knew we were already doing really well and could do more of in sort of a for good social impact contribution. So I would say at least for corporations, think about what you're good at and try to anchor your sustainable AI strategies, interventions, principles around that, because that will just lead to a much more long-term sustainable contribution versus, doing something kind of like that's not core to your business. I think that also holds, like, the world is a tough place today. So staying close to kind of your lane, what you're really strong at, I think will ensure that these interventions are more longer term sustainable.
Great.
And then for individuals, we did this crazy thing in February when I called a bunch of women I worked with, 40 women actually, that I worked with throughout my career, all with leadership roles in climate. And I all asked them, like, do you feel good about AI? Do you know what it is? Do you understand it? Are you using it for your own sort of efficiency at work? And they're all, generally all of them just said, I have no idea what this is. It scares me. I'm really concerned about the environmental impact. I'm sitting on the sidelines feeling really stressed. So we just came together as we call it the Women in Climate community. So over the last 16 weeks, we've just met once a week, and my team brings some skills, some kind of basic tutorials, and we experiment with different technologies, and we talk about what they're good at, what they're not so good at. And then we have a WhatsApp group where we share articles that we read that upsets us or that gets us happy and excited, and we discuss them in community. And I think that I didn't know that I needed a women's group, but I really did. And I think joining together, even if it's a group of colleagues, maybe it's a handful of neighbors or it's friends, just coming together and kind of unpack this topic that's moving so fast, that has the potential to really like rewire society, economies, communities. I think this is a time where we should kind of do that together.
I love that, because what you're essentially saying is, let's harness the energy in the system and dance with it to flow that energy into the direction we want it to flow, and let's realize we all have agency. There's something we can all do. Thank you so much, Anna, for joining us. It's been lovely to chat with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.
That was also really, really interesting. What struck you, Wayne?
Well, I think what came across for me is that, whatever you point AI at, it will accelerate, right? That's really what it's doing. It's like a supercharger. And the question that emerged from these discussions was, it doesn't help to accelerate in a broken system. So it doesn't alleviate the necessity to actually change the system itself. And if we're able to do that, then AI could probably accelerate the solutions. So the question we always have to ask when we're talking about AI is, AI for what? What's it being pointed at? How about you? What intrigued you?
I think that's really interesting, actually. AI needs the right architecture. But I think what struck for me was social movements when it comes to driving that accountability for AI, and particularly data centers, might do what policy isn't yet doing. I was really struck by the fact that people can see the data centers. They are lowering water tables in some parts of the US. Joel was talking about the fact that this issue has stepped over, traditional political lines, and communities are finding their voice. And I think that is really interesting. So could society become the accountability mechanism for AI and tech?
Yeah, maybe a lever we hadn't necessarily anticipated. So could be very powerful. Well, what's the dance vibe you get for this sector, Sally?
So I've thought about this a little bit, and I'm going to go for the Paso Doble because it is a dance of incredible power. You've got the bull charging at the matador, but who's going to win? Because they're both really, really powerful, and it's dynamic, it's fast-paced. And so when I think about tech, there's a big Paso Doble going on right now between the hyperscalers, community, society, policy, and where will that cape go?
Yeah, and there are red flags there, right?
Absolutely.
As there are in tech. Well, that's it for this episode, and we look forward to you joining us next time when we dive into another sector.
Thank you.